conversation we've got. Michael Gaspar is the head of the customer office of SAP Customer Experience. And anyone who doesn't know what SAP is, it is either the largest or the second largest, I'm not sure which, ERP company in the world. I don't know, Michael, do you know if it's the largest or the second largest ERP company in the world? One of the two.
I'd say we're the largest, Chris.
Yeah, I think so too. I wasn't sure. And I'm not going to say the name of that other company, right? It's not so important. Anyway, he has a unique combination of experience, including aviation with the U.S. Air Force. We were just talking about some super sophisticated secret technology stuff that Michael is aware of. And he still serves as a reservist in the U.S. Air Force, so maybe we can get some secrets out of him there as well. And he's held leadership roles at top technology companies like Salesforce, Cisco, and Tesla. Too bad he can't find a company to work for that has a name anybody knows. Michael, thank you very much for joining us. And I will turn the stage over to you by turning off my camera, and we're going to hear you talk about the keys to seamless CX success.
Great, thanks so much, Chris, and everyone. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. As Chris said, my name is Michael Gaspar, and it's really my privilege to serve as the chief of the SAP Customer Experience Customer Office, and more importantly, it's my privilege to speak to all of you today about how we deliver seamless CX, and I apologize for my apparent inability to put this in the right presenter mode, but I think that's okay because it's not so much about the slides, it's about the conversation that we're going to have. And I'm really eager to get to your questions in the dialogue, but before we do that, I think it's important that we anchor ourselves on, three things that I really think we should be discussing today. And the first of those things is, what do we mean by customer experience? What is a seamless customer experience? The second question after that, I think, naturally follows. If we understand what customer experience is, what seamless CX is, what challenges stand in the way of getting to that? And then if we understand the challenges, the most exciting part of that is how do we overcome those challenges? And I'm eager to share with you some of the things that I'm trying and my team are trying here in SAP to overcome those very challenges that we've identified, that our customers have identified, and that I think you might be experiencing as well. Before we go into that portion, though, I want to invite you to do something with me. And if you're in a spot where you feel comfortable, and if we were in a large auditorium, I'd ask you to do this anyway. Close your eyes and think about a customer experience that defines CX for you. So if you have that in your mind, keep it, because we can reference that in the future. I would love to ask you what yours is out loud, but I asked the question, so I think it's only fair that I go first. And for me, it's actually a haircut. And I'm sure that sounds, a little bit simple to many of you. That if you get a haircut, it's a relatively routine experience. It's probably mundane, and it certainly should be, I think. But several years ago, I took a leave of absence from a job in Silicon Valley here in the West Coast United States to do a consulting role in Germany. And I had to live in a small rural village in southwestern Germany. I had just recently got married, but we hadn't figured out my wife's work situation. We hadn't established her visa to come into Germany with me. So it was just me and our German Shepherd at the time. And while I'm that person who many of you might think of as an annoying dog owner, even I recognize that when I talk to my dog, I'm ultimately talking to myself. So for the first time in my life, I truly feel not just alone, I feel isolated. And that was an unsettling experience for me. I was starting a new job. I had no friends. I had no connections to the area. Couldn't speak the language. I still, speak very little German. I didn't even have a place to live. I was going down to the hotel lobby desk every night, asking if I could extend my stay a few more days. So I looked for an apartment or a house to rent while I was to establish myself in Germany. So through all of that, I eventually realized, oh my goodness, I need to get a haircut. So I start walking through this small village, and I see those classic striped barber poles, and I decide, all right, you know what, this is it. Even strangers in a strange land have to get a haircut at some point. So I push open the door, and I walk into this small barber shop. There's about 8 barbers in a U-shaped formation, fiercely cutting hair. There's a senior barber, I presume to be the owner, in the middle of all of this. There's about 20 people waiting in this area trying to get a haircut, right? And it's loud, it's noisy, it's thriving. It's everything you'd expect from a business that is doing well. But for me, in that moment, it really underscored how isolated I was. And so candidly, what did I do? I turned around, I pushed open the door, and I walked out, right? I make it about 50 meters up the street before I feel someone grab me on my right shoulder. And I turn around, and who do you think it is? It's the senior barber from that barber shop. And he looks at me in the eyes, and he says, "I got you. I got you." So in that moment, I feel entirely recognized. And my wife would eventually come to live with me in Germany. We had a great time. We lived in Europe for about 20 months. And I eventually found places that were closer to my office to get a haircut. I found places that were cheaper to get a haircut. But every 2 weeks for 20 months, I went to that exact same shop and I saw that exact same barber. I got you. And I think the moral of that story is, if we think about it, and hopefully you can recognize some attributes in the stories that you put in your minds that you reflected upon, but several things happened during that exchange that I think illustrate what a seamless experience is. So that owner, when he saw me, he had to recognize me and instantly assess my situation. Here's a customer, and he had to assess the need of the urgency. This person looks like they need something pretty badly. At the same time, he has to assess all the work that's going on and decide, is he going to reshift and reprioritize work to make this potential customer a priority? As he's doing that, he also has to communicate that plan to me. Now, I walked out before I acknowledged the communication. I don't know, maybe he tried to speak to me, maybe it was in German. I didn't know the language, so I wasn't receiving it. I wasn't on the right channel, if you will, to receive that information. Despite that, he decided to pursue me, make a physical connection, and then he communicated with me in a way that I understood. All of this was transparent to me, right? I'm the customer at this point. I have something else in my mind. This is all happening for him. That's seamless customer experience. That's what I think excellent customer experience looks like in miniature, and I think what we all can try to achieve at scale. So then ultimately, we get to that next question that we asked ourselves, right? So what is a seamless customer experience? And I've had the good privilege to travel around the world and talk with customers in my role as the head of our customer office. In the past month alone, I was talking to Chris. I've probably spoken with close to 140 customers, and we ask a slightly different variation of this question because everyone's talking about they want seamless customer experience. So I flipped it back on them and I asked them, what do you want your customers to say about your CX? And inevitably, no matter who I talk to, 4 key themes always come up. I want my customer experience to be personal. I want my customer experience to be pervasive. I want my customer experience to be relevant. And I want my customer experience to be easy. I'll note there that no one says, I want my customer experience to be technology first, right? Business leaders, for the most part, aren't thinking about, I want my customer experience to be text driven or self-service. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Those are awesome tools, and I think you should absolutely consider them. But when you think about what you want customers to say about you and your brand and your customer experience, it's not technology, it's they want it to be personal, they want it to be pervasive, they want it to be relevant, and they want it to be easy. So when we talk about personal, if you drill down on that, people just want to be recognized, right? There's power in saying someone's name. There's power in knowing someone's history, especially if they've shared that history with you already. When you think about pervasiveness, customer experience at some point should be so reliable so infused in the organization that you and your customers don't even think about it. When I get up in the morning and I turn on the light switch in the bathroom, the light turns on. When I go and turn on the faucet, the water flows. Customer experience should get to the point where we almost, as businesses, take it for granted because just it's such a part of our DNA and our customers expect that from us. There's also this tremendous push, this demand for customer experience to be relevant. If you know someone, you should be talking to them about things that matter to them. That's how you add value to someone's life. You're relevant to them. You don't just inundate them with useless information or heaven forbid, a distraction. And then ultimately, what we're all trying to achieve is some level of ease, right? Customers in their own lives, they have families to manage. They have professional lives to manage. They don't want to also do work for us as businesses to figure out how to do our work. They want it to be easy. And candidly, our employees who are frontline facing employees want that as well. The ease is such an important part of this game. And if I think about, another analogy for this, another story behind this, I think about my mom. And if you're here in the United States or no matter where you are in the world, think about this kind of person. My mom is a recently retired ICU nurse, right? An intensive care unit nurse. She grew up in the middle of the United States, solid working middle class woman. And she carries around in her purse a little notebook. And maybe if some of you have worked in customer experience, you've seen this person, and my mom can get a little testy, so I apologize if that's the case. In that notebook, she writes down key moments that she's having with the brand. She wouldn't describe it like this, but she does, right? If she's going to make an important buying decision, she's going to write down who she talked to. She's going to write down when she talked with them, when she spoke with them. She's going to write down what they spoke about. She's going to remember the promise that the brand made to her via that person. And guess what? She's going to walk into another branch, or she's going to call the contact center. She's going to find someone else in that organization and expect them to remember that when, that where, that what, and the why of that initial conversation. And she literally will. I've heard her on the phone many times growing up, and even when I visit her now, talking to someone, she has her little notebook out. Well, I talked to Tim, and he was in the store, and he told me this. And as a business professional, as someone who has done the technology bit of this for several years now, almost a little more than a decade, I recognize that there are tools out there that can help that conversation. And in so many instances, my mom is let down, the customer is let down. And I think we have to ask ourselves why. We know what we need to deliver in terms of a seamless customer experience. How do we get there? And that's what we're here to talk about today. So the next part of this is, what challenges stand in the way? And anyone who has been doing this for any length of time won't be surprised by these challenges. Fundamentally, I think one of the challenges we face, and this word gets used a lot, so forgive me, there are silos in our organizations. And the silos were not just randomly put in place, right? The silos help us as leaders manage our organizations. And an effective management is designed to create a very efficient division of labor. So what do you have? You have a sales silo, right? You have a service silo. You probably have a marketing silo, an IT silo. I don't know all of your businesses intimately, but you do. You can identify what those silos are, and they probably help you run a very clean bureaucracy. But let's recognize that silo was not designed with the customer in mind. It was designed with us in mind. And that fundamentally is a problem as we move into a new era of customer experience. Layer on that siloed mentality is this idea of complexity, right? We put complexity into our organizations. There are processes in place, most of them again designed to protect the organization, to make sure that multiple parties are involved, to mitigate risk. And these are all important things. There will be some level of complexity. There'll be some level of silo or bureaucracy in any organization. But the challenge is that complexity standing in the way of engaging with the customer? Another thing that I think stands in the way that I've faced as a personal consumer, and I'm sure many of you have faced in some respects as well, is just an overgeneralization or a stereotyping of who our customers are. My last name is Gaspar. and it probably is Spanish, but my dad is Filipino. The Philippines was what's the Spanish colony. So you're not wrong in the assumption that Gaspar has some sort of Spanish lineage. But if you know anything about me, you'll know that, and I was talking to Chris about this before the call, I don't speak Spanish, I don't speak Tagalog, and some of you are learning right now, I don't speak English very well either. But consistently, I will receive direct mailings from all sorts of organizations entirely in the Spanish language. So it's hard for me as a consumer to give an organization my money or my time when they haven't even bothered to know me at a basic level. And that's a function of how we overgeneralize our customers in many ways. And lastly, and this one has come up more and more in, let's call it a post-pandemic world, if we're allowed to use such a phrase, and it's the pace of change. Think about how much has changed in the world in the past 2.5 to 3 years. How has technology changed? How have customer expectations changed? And none of us is positioned, and none of us knows what the future of that change looks like. So really, that's a challenge as I talk to business leaders, and it's probably one of the most pressing challenges that they face is, how do I address, how do I keep up with the pace of change? And one way to think about that is the concept of aviation. Chris mentioned in my introduction that I came out of a U.S. Air Force aviation background. My wife is actually, she's in a new career now, but she spent several years as a pilot. She was an instructor, and she ended her aviation career as a first officer in a Boeing 737. And I don't think I'm showing my slides, but there's a picture that I hold dear, and I use in other presentations of my wife on the right side, where if any of you like to fly or know aviation, when you board the aircraft, turn to your left, the pilot always sits in the left seat. The first officer sits in the right seat. So my wife was a right seater on Boeing 737s. She bought a small plane several years ago just to practice flying. And one of the things that you learn in aviation is that the safety of the aircraft always comes first. There's a focus, a maniacal focus on the safety of the aircraft. Second is, are you going to get to your destination? And in pursuit of that myopic, of that hyper focus on safety, rank and position don't matter. If you see something, if you are a senior pilot, if you're brand new to the flight deck, if you are a flight attendant in the Air Force, if anyone, I used to run mission crews, if you're brand new to the crew, if you're on this aircraft as part of the crew, you are responsible for its safety. And you don't just have an invitation to say something is wrong, you have an obligation to say something is wrong, because that's how focused we are on that. Right, so if you think about in the context of our business silos, are we hyper-focused on the customer? Are we hyper-focused on the mission? And I assume the mission ultimately we can drive down to is servicing or engaging with the customer, right? Because that's how our businesses thrive. Think about if you really drill down to that, how that could affect those silos. Now you can start working together to solve people's problems. It also addresses a lot of complexity, right? All these tools that if you ever looked into the cockpit of a modern aircraft, or even a simple single engine two-seater at your local community airport, all those tools, all those gauges, they are just there to amplify information, right? Pilots are taught, aviators are taught, do not get hyper-focused on any one tool, because if that tool is wrong, then you could find yourself in a dangerous situation. In fact, oftentimes the reference is a visual reference, right? At the end of the day, if you know your route, and here in Tampa, you can point out that is the stadium where the local football team plays. That is Tampa Bay itself. It's a large body of water, right? Oh, that is the major interstate system. It runs north-south. These are visual references that no matter where you are in the area, you can look out the aircraft, assuming visual rules, and you can see that and orient yourself. That helps reduce a lot of complexity for the tools that you have. If I carry on the aviation analogy, there's a chance there to also recognize that in that setting, you have to get rid of your biases, right? You can't assume that something is something or something is the current state and is right because it's always been that way. You want to challenge those assumptions. You want to challenge those biases, challenge those stereotypes, and confirm with multiple sources, is that what we think? Is that what we want to do? Does that get us to our focus? Does it get us to the point where we want to be at? It also helps really manage that pace of change. Thank you, Chris. It helps manage.
Michael, I want to interrupt you. Your talk is so damn good that I just realized your slides weren't changing.
Okay, well, that's fine. Hopefully.
That's how good your talk was. I suddenly realized, wait a minute, I'm still looking at his title slide. So I don't know what's going on there, but because I see there's a couple slides. Totally up to you. If you want to somehow get it over where we can see it.
I appreciate you stopping me, and that's fine. We can abandon the slides. Hopefully, I'm painting a good enough picture.
I don't want you to end it all. I just want to tell you, your talk is so good, you do it without even needing the slides. So well done.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that, and thank you for. I apologize for the distraction then of the poor image, and we can keep it down, Chris. If the visuals aren't enhancing the story, we're just going to have to look at me, and hopefully this lovely fiddle leaf plant that my wife and I have nurtured from near death is enough to keep you engaged. But the pace of change, right? And you think about, again, and I assume many of you have been in an airplane or you've been in a boat or you've driven a car. Right? And think about all the things that change so consistently. And I'm going to go back to aviation because that's the part of the story that I really wanted to focus on. There's a lot you can predict, but there's a lot you can't predict, right? The weather changes, and all of you have felt turbulence. As good as the radars are on modern aircraft, as good as meteorology has become, you will hit an unexpected pocket of turbulence, right? And as an aviator, you have to decide, is this a dangerous pocket? Is this something I can go through? Is this something we avoid? There's clouds forming up ahead. No one's told me about them, but I see them. Should I try to go through? Can my aircraft handle that? Do I go around? What does that mean for cost, for efficiency? Do I have enough fuel to go around this storm? Do I have to go someplace else? You know, pace of change is not unique to technology. It's not unique to the business that you run. I'm sure a lot of you feel that way, and that's okay. I want to acknowledge those feelings, but change is inevitable. Change has always happened. The pace will accelerate. It will decelerate. Who knows? What's important, though, is that if you have a focus point, you can navigate that change. You can determine for yourself as a business leader, is this new tool that someone is talking about going to help my organization get to its focus point? Is this new realm of technology that's developing? And we can talk about that during the Q&A. Is that something we want to pursue? Should we explore it? How much? I don't know. I can't answer that question for you. What I can challenge you to ask yourself is, do we see ourselves and our customers in that space? And if so, I think you have to try to pursue it. You have to try to explore it, right? So now the last thing that I wanted to talk about before we break for Q&A is, how do we overcome these challenges? And here I'd like to share with you some things that we're trying on this team, and hopefully you find that valuable, but happy to talk about this more. And the first one is, have you experienced your brand the way your customers experience your brand? And hopefully some of you are running or have in your organizations a voice of the customer program. Maybe you're asking surveys, and hopefully you're taking action on the survey results that you're receiving. But I really want to challenge all of us, and something I've challenged myself and my team is, and I've told our Chief Revenue Officer and the other senior leadership team, we have to know the experience our customers have with our brand, right? We are asking here at SAP our customers to make a significant investment with us. And if I don't know what your pain points are, if I don't know what that experience is like for you, I think I would argue it's selfish of me to ask that of you, right? I have to know what your challenges are, not just as a business, but what are your challenges in engaging with me? And so that's one of the things that we are launching here in the next month, is using our own kind of advisory team to shop us, to tell us what the challenges are, not what we think they are, not what we think we do well. You tell us what customers think about doing business, of shopping with SAP customer experience. Building upon that, once you know what that journey looks like, are you asking really good questions? You know, think about that voice of the customer program, think about the survey questions that you're asking. And I would challenge you, you know, KYC, know your customer. When I was at Salesforce, I was working with our financial services customers, and KYC was a concept largely related to financial security, and it's very important in that regard. Do not get me wrong. But ask questions that get you to know that allow you to know your customer. If these people who are sending direct mail to me ask me what are my language preferences, I would tell you I aspirationally want to speak Spanish. I wish that I spoke Tagalog, so I could, which is the native language of the Philippines, so I could speak to my cousins or my relatives still there, or even my family living in Hawaii, because they don't speak English as well as some people do, but I don't. So if you want to do business with me, English is my preferred operating language, right? My wife and I don't have kids. We have 2 dogs. I willingly share that with the organizations that I do business with. Ask those questions. Ask questions that help you relate to your customers in the way that you want to relate to them to make things personal, right? Remember what we talked about earlier on what defines really good customer experience. If you have that map, if you know what your customers are experiencing with you, you've asked really good questions, you now have a lot of data on top of all the data you already have in your organizations, right? So here then the challenge is to use that data and use it wisely. You can probably tell because I'm obsessed with airplanes. I like flying, so I travel on airlines a lot, and I give a lot of information to the airlines I travel with to make things easier for me, right? I want them to proactively engage with me, tell me about trips coming up. If something's going to impact my journey, I want them to tell me. I do the same thing with the hotels at which I stay. I share that information. I love it when I can walk into a hotel chain, you know, I open the door and someone greets me, hey, Mr. Gaspar, welcome, you know, your room is ready. In many cases, you know, I can do a lot of that from my mobile phone, right? I check in while I'm at the airport and they tell me my room is ready. I just go up to the door, touch the door pad with my phone and I'm let in. I would probably find it uncomfortable if I had decided to get an Uber from the airport to the hotel and 15 blocks away, someone knocks on my window, on the door and says, hey, Mr. Gaspar, welcome to the hotel. We'll see you in 15 blocks. To me, that would just unsettle me, right? And maybe for some of you, you think, oh, that's amazing. That's great. The point is that you ask the customer where they want to be engaged with and how they want to engage with you. If you don't know that, then you're really taking a guess, right? And technology can help you get really refined at asking good questions and developing good answers. And lastly, and this relates to all the things we talked about, it's, are you putting the customer first? And that's the thing we, you know, me and the other leaders here at SAP talk to our customers about is, are you putting your customer first? I'd love to talk to you about technology. I'd love talking about, you know, agent desktops, because I'm a nerd that way. I love talking about data solutions and hyper-personalization and how that happens and getting our experts engaged with you. But if you don't know who your customer is, if the customer isn't first, candidly, ladies and gentlemen, all the technology in the world isn't going to help, right? You need to have a focus on who the customer is and what you want to do with the customer, and then you can find this amazing set of tools, and there's a lot of them out there to help you get there. At the end of the day, you just really got to think of it as you're in a relationship with your customer. Whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, you're in a relationship with them, and you have a say in what that relationship looks like. So does the customer, remember, that's why you're asking questions. But if you hold in your mind, again, I asked you what's a good experience, maybe ask yourself also, you know, what's a positive relationship in my life? It's probably one where you have a personal connection. It's probably one where if someone calls, you're there for them, right? There's neighbors here in my neighborhood. If Kenan or Adam call me, I'm there, and they know that they can knock on my door, or they can call me, they can text me any time of night. My wife and I will help them out however we can. We talk about things that are important to each other and relevant to each other. And because we know each other, we can also challenge assumptions and ideas of interesting conversations. It's also because we have that establishment of trust, it's easy to talk to each other. So again, think of it as you're in a relationship with your customers. You know, so once again, and I do apologize that I really couldn't figure out how to use PowerPoint. That's entirely on me. Hopefully you got something from this, and it really has been a tremendous privilege to talk to you today. I look forward to your questions. At the end of the day, please remember that customer experience is a human experience, right? Put the human first in it. Be empathetic. You'll be surprised at how much people are willing to forgive organizations if there's just a little bit of bi-directional communication and decent expectation setting in the way you would to a friend, right? Technology is a tool, it is not an answer. And I say that as someone who has sold technology and made a living off of it. It's not going to solve all your problems. And if someone is telling you that, please challenge them and please, you know, get a second opinion, to use a medical phrase. Remember, at the end of the day, you're asking customers to part with time or money, and that's really precious in today's world. People are working so hard. You know, inflation, stresses in the world, and no matter where you are, you're probably facing some of that. Why should they choose you? You know, at the end of the day, ask yourselves, can you tell your customers, I got you? So it's been a tremendous privilege. Sorry for the distraction. Chris, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to address any questions that.
Well, first of all, any apologies you could make are totally unnecessary. I thought, I'm sure your slides were great. Your presentation was fantastic. And it's more about, using these sharing devices. Anyway, I got you. I love that story. If with your permission, I'm going to steal that and say, my friend Michael. I won't say I was the guy in Germany, but I'm going to steal that story because it's so good.
I'm happy to. Yeah, please. Yeah, I'm happy to share it.
Okay, so I'm going to take this slightly to a very potentially very risky direction. Most important relationship in most people's lives after their parents, right? You grew up as a child and after your parents, is the person you choose to spend the rest of your life with, if you choose to spend the rest of your life with another person. 50% of those relationships in the United States fail. I have no idea what the numbers are for failed customer relationships, right? So the question I have for you, and I didn't warn you that I was going to ask you this because I didn't know I was going to ask you until 5 minutes. So if we think and I'm not saying we need to get into marriage therapy, but what do you think we need to do to improve not only our customer satisfaction, but our customer retention, our customer intimacy? I mean, in the most generic way, customer intimacy to the point that these people want to stay married to us for as long as the relationship exists. What are your thoughts on that? What kind of mindset? Because when you say it's important, and I started this conversation off the very beginning of the day with the Japanese quote, "Okyaku-san wa kami-sama desu," which means the customer is God in Japanese. And if I were going to say that properly, it says "Okyaku-san wa kami-sama desu." Anyway, that's a whole philosophical viewpoint from Japanese business. How do you and I, if it's just you and me here and whoever's listening, how do we change our mindset, and what does it take so that we start thinking like that?
Yeah, that's well. First of all, I love that mindset in Japanese. I might have to steal that from you.
You're welcome.
And the marriage analogy is a good one, right? And I said the relationship piece at the end of my talk there for a reason, because I think we really have to understand you're in a relationship with someone. So then how do you define a good relationship? And I think it's, are you talking to each other? And if you think about it, customers, especially today in the digital world in which we live, are giving up or talking so much into the world. Are you actively listening? And that's hard. And again, I'm not a marriage counselor, and I'll be, I'll share a little bit more intimately here. I'm a divorcee, so I've done it wrong once, and it probably was a result of not listening. It was a result of not communicating. It was a result of putting myself first or living up to expectations that really weren't the primary focus of me or my spouse at the time, right? There was a miscommunication there. So I think it's important to understand, like, when you choose a spouse, you're selecting out like a whole bunch of people to commit to. You and customers, or customers and we and customers have that same thing. Not everyone is going to be your customer, and that's okay. But that's if you ask internally, what are you looking for? What is your focus? What do you want to do as an organization? And once you decide that, then you have to really put yourself in like, all right, well, I'm going to listen to these people. I'm going to talk to them. I want to get to be their friend. And that's that personalization bit, right? That's just knowing who they are.
Right.
And there's tools that help with that, right? And that's the technology bit that's where that comes back into play. But it's really just the fundamentals of making a friend, right? Your friends can choose not to be your friend. If you offend them, if you don't listen to them,
sure.
Customers the same way.
It's a fascinating, and people might get squirrely about this and say, well, why are you? Oh, you're going to mix business and look. Your life is work most of the time, right? When you're not working, you're with the relationships that matter. Those are the two things you have to get right. Your relationships, and I mean, of course, I include the kids and all that with you if you have kids, or the dog, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you.
And the customers, right? It's funny. I used to give this, this is the typical middle-aged guy giving advice to the young consultant thing, right? So I'd be talking to these young consultants and with women and men at the same table. And I would say, look, guys, if you want to figure out this marriage thing, the only thing I would say to you is this: 9 times out of 10, do whatever the heck your wife says. Just because she's probably going to rewrite anyway, right? So just do it anyway. You get over the fact that you you may have a different idea. She's probably right. So go along with that. And then they go, well, what do you mean? And the reason, the same thing with a customer. And then they say, what do you mean 9 times? What about the 10th time? And I'd say, well, the 10th time, you just say no. And they're like, well, how do you know when to say no? And I said, it doesn't matter, because if you say yes all the time, they won't respect you.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm thinking to myself, a customer, like you check into a hotel, and if a hotel says yes, 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 to the more outrageous claims you can possibly make, that's not good, because you're taking advantage of the person. You're taking advantage of the vendor or the mortgage broker, the hospital, the hotel. So, I mean, I'm stretching the analogy a little bit, but I do think there's a respect where, hey, don't push me too far. I'm going to do 9 times out of 10, I'm going to give you everything you can possibly get. And once in a while, I'm going to say, maybe you're pushing me a little too far on this.
I think that's absolutely appropriate. And that's part of you, walking your own experience and understanding who your customers are and who you want them to be, and who you, and in that interrogation of yourself, you should determine, or of your customer journey, shall we say, you should determine what you're willing to do as an organization. I mean, I make the joke, I would love if everywhere I went, every business I walked in, mom, pa shop, largest hotel chain in the world, I want a full bottle of champagne right when I walk in. That's not sustainable, right? And I'm probably, to many organizations, I'm not worth it. And maybe some of you are. Maybe some of you are that kind of customer where you walk in and they know, like, oh my gosh, Mr. Hodges is here, we better get out the nice champagne. Michael Gaspar is not that kind of person. It's not where I am in life, and that's okay.
Right.
You as an organization have to determine that. And I think customers acknowledge that, right? And the people who don't aren't going to be your customer. That's this idea of customers want to be in a relationship with you. They're going to give you your money if they respect you and you respect them back. But that's that if you don't respect them, if you don't listen to them, then why should they try to respect you? They will look for ways to abuse the system to get around you and your margins or take away your profits, whatever your metrics are there. But I know not everyone's going to give me a bottle of champagne.
I think we can build a whole seminar on this subject. This is
That'd be fun. That would be fun.
It's funny you mentioned the champagne thing. So I was in an airplane once, and I told this guy I wanted to fly to Florence, Italy. I was living in Europe at the time. I wanted to fly to Florence, Italy. My wife wanted to go to Florence, and he recommended some hotel. And I said, well, honey, this guy on the hotel, he said it on the plane. So we checked in, we booked a room at this hotel. We had no idea what we were getting into when we got there. It was way too expensive. Anyway, it's too late. I've already committed to my wife. And so they give us a bottle of champagne. I've never had that happen before in my life. So there's a bottle of champagne in the pretty silver bucket, and it's overlooking like the church and all that. Well, that's nice. Of course, you're paying for that. But here's the thing that I thought was magic. We didn't finish the bottle of champagne completely. There was maybe I don't know how much was left. Like maybe a glass or two or something at the bottom. Now, many hotels would have just taken that champagne and thrown it away and cleaned it out of the room. We came back and they put one of those little cap things on it to keep the carbonation, refreshed the ice, and they kept refreshing it until we drank it. I was like, that's impressive. That's really impressive. And we didn't ask, right? So anyway, it's funny that you brought up champagne. And if anyone wants a recommendation for a hotel in Florence, give me a call. I'll tell you.
I'll take you up on that too. I mean, a lot of it is, and we talk about this. One of the things that our teams talk about, customer experience can be viewed as where the customer meets your brand promise. So whatever your brand promise is.
Wait, say that slowly, because that's really important.
Customer experience is where the customer meets your brand promise, and you have to ask yourself that intersection: are we delivering on the promise made to our customers? Right. So in your case, that brand had set the expectations for its customers that they get that champagne, right? And they get that level of service, whether you knew it or not. For them, every customer gets that level of service, right? So if there's a misalignment there, you either need to recommunicate to your customers what the expectation is so they know what to expect, or you need to dial back or dial up your expectations. And I cannot, in a large setting, tell you what the right answer is, because there is no right answer, right? There is a luxury hotel brand model in the world, to use to further this analogy, and there is a budget hotel brand in the world, and all of them they're making money, they're being successful now, and that people are traveling.
Did you just freeze, Michael?
Am I back?
Michael, are you there?
Chris?
Yeah, you said something. You said there's a luxury brand, and then you went frozen.
There's a luxury brand of like a hotel, let's say, and we all know them, and there are budget brands of hotels. And more than often, they're full, they're doing business, they're established. Customers know what to expect in either one of them because they communicate what it is. What the problem is, where friction happens, is where people, take this level of there's a mismatch of expectation. And then as owners of the brand, as protectors of the brand, as leaders of the brand here on this call, is your expectation, is your promise meeting customers' expectations? Remember that intersection and figure that out.
It's rare that you get to such a crisp takeaway point. I have nothing else to say to you or listen. That's what they need to hear. That point you just said is what they need to take away. So look, Michael, I've done a lot of these sessions and I've listened to a lot of people give talks. Yours was one of the most captivating, interesting, and totally relevant. And I don't blow sunshine up anybody's skirt. That was a really, really good presentation. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I don't know if you're making yourself available to people to follow up to you, but I'm not going to make you commit to that. Hopefully, if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to you. And of course, they can become an SAP customer.
Even if we are happy to foster a community of like-minded people. That's one of the initiatives that I've started as well here in this organization, is that whether you're a customer or not, we are looking for people who are just interested in customer experience, right? So if anyone listening to this wants to reach out to me, my last name is actually Gaspar. Find me on LinkedIn. It's michael.gaspar@sap.com. I'm happy to connect you with that organization of just people who are talking about some of these ideas, right? And we have people from across industries, from across the globe. We're looking to foster that community. There is no precondition to be an SAP customer. The only precondition is that you are interested in talking about customer experience and can help add to that conversation. So happy to have that directly with our friends here on this webinar. We're happy to connect with people in a private setting as well.
That's fantastic. Michael, I personally, even if it was just the two of us the entire call, which is not the case, but if it were just the two of us, I feel privileged to have heard this conversation. Even if you are an Air Force guy.
I knew it was going to come up, and I appreciate the high praise from a Navy man, from a Navy officer.
All right, well, go Navy, go Air Force, go customer experience. Thank you very much, Michael, and to everybody on the call. Actually, Michael, I've got a couple of closing remarks I need to do about the next upcoming event. So feel free to drop off now, and I'll do a little bit of that as we wrap up. Okay, everybody. Well, look, I don't know if everybody felt the same way I did about that one, but I love a good story that is totally related to the subject that we're talking about. I just love the empathy and genuine connection to what he was referring to. I got you. Boy, there's a quote to remember. When the expectations and the customer experience meet your promise. So, it's great when you get some big takeaways like that. Okay, look, that wraps us up for the day, but let me take you back before we take off for the day. Let me go back to okay, some of the upcoming events. I'll just cover this very quickly. Digital Process Automation Live, that is June 21st. You can find this, of course, on Proqis, Proqis.com. Look at the upcoming virtual conferences, and I'll just lay a few of them out there for you to think about. Digital Process Automation Live, June 21st. Enterprise Agile Planning Live, June 28th. That's Enterprise Agile Planning Live, June 28th. Business Transformation Ops Excellence in Oil and Gas Asia. So if you're from the Asian audience, that's July 5th through 7th. And then I think you should probably just go out on the site and look at the rest of them, because there's about 25 on the list, and I don't think you need to hear them all today. So I'd like to thank Proqis, the sponsors of the events today, and the speakers who willingly gave their time and their experience. You can hear in these conversations, you can hear the years of experience that people have had solving client problems, giving client satisfaction and delight. And of course, for every solved problems, there's usually some skinned knees and some cuts and bruises along the way, otherwise known as life lessons or best practices. So I want to thank all the people for doing that today on the event. And again, thank Proqis. I hope to see you all in the future at another event. I think I'll be at another one of these events coming up sometime soon. And I'll see you then. Again, this is Christopher Hodges. If you want to find me, you can find me at chris@nobleautomationnow.com. chris@nobleautomationnow.com. And yes, that is the name of my book. Take care. We'll see you all at the next Proqis event. Bye-bye.